What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm here today to do my post-game analysis video for you for the Bengals game. Before I get into that, I want to mention just really quick, last night the Steelers lost their first game of the season. I think they're now like 11-1 or whatever. And so, obviously, the Dolphins and Dolphins fans get to celebrate that there will not be an undefeated team this year. So there's that. Larry Zonka was, on social media. They even talked about it during the game. They showed a little clip of him, whatever, celebrating. Yay. So that's cool. Dolphins fans get to, remain the only undefeated team. I mean, obviously, that includes the Super Bowl as well. So, and there's a damn good chance that the Steelers are going to make it to the Super Bowl this year. They are certainly one of the top tier, if not the top tier team in the league at the moment. Anyway, so there's that. That's fun. That's good news. I generally do root for the Steelers when we don't play them because my sister is a Steelers fan. So, like, I'm a fan by affiliation or whatever. Like I said, when we don't play them. But in this case, I was happy to see that they did get a loss. Obviously, I wanted to see them lose at some point, whether it be in the regular season, the postseason, or the Super Bowl, just so that way they don't get to match the Dolphins' 1972 perfect season. Anyway, so there's that celebration there. And then also, last night, the Bills did get a win. Really convincing win, actually. And, they now move to, I believe, 9-3 on the season. So they still remain one game ahead of us. I'm pretty sure we're going to lose this game against the Chiefs. I think it's almost a guarantee. They just vastly outmatch the Dolphins. I know people don't like that. A lot of people hate when I say shit like that. But that's just the reality of it. And I think the evidence is pretty clear. Also, just real quick, look, and I'm going to obviously get into this, but this Dolphins team, they are not dominant. They are not a dominant team. There's nothing about that. They have moments, don't get me wrong. I mean, particularly on defense, and they have like two what I would consider dominant players. So you have Xavier Howard, who is a dominant player, and they have Jason Sanders, who's a dominant kicker. But that's really about it. Tua's not there yet. Maybe he will be one day, but he's not there yet. This Dolphins team is definitely overperforming on the season, and I think that there's a substantial possibility that they do make it to the playoffs with the expanded format, and because of all of the different factors that led to the Dolphins' success this season. I think they will ultimately have a 9-7 record and make it to the playoffs, but I don't think that they're going to go past the first round, especially with the teams there. Now, obviously, lots of things can happen. We still have to wait and see the next few weeks how COVID impacts things, how injuries impact things. So obviously things can change. But as it stands right now, my guess is that my prediction is that the Dolphins will go 9-7 and then lose in the first round of the playoffs. We'll see. Obviously, I hope that's not the case. And in fact, I would love to be able to see them upset the Chiefs this weekend. I will definitely be doing a live stream. If I'm keeping it real and being honest with you guys, I accidentally slept through the game yesterday. Or not yesterday, excuse me, Sunday. And that's why I didn't do a live stream. I woke up like hella late. So that's super my bad. But I do expect to do a stream for this because it's a huge test for the Dolphins. And frankly, it's really the first time that they've actually played a really good team. And that's also healthy, right? So throughout the year, either they've played, teams that are either, bad teams or decimated by injuries or a mix of both, right? They did play the Bills, obviously, who are a really good team. But even in that case, they were missing, a couple of their key defenders who they have both of now. They have both Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano back in the lineup and should have them for the game against the Dolphins, which is going to be in Buffalo. That's a game I also think that we're going to lose. But yeah, so, for the most part, the Dolphins have gotten lucky in a lot of ways, right? Tua has gotten lucky because he should have 8 interceptions now on the season. He lucked out again, which we will talk about in the breakdown of the game. again in this again this week. He lucked out and should have threw at least 2, if not 3 interceptions. And, you know, I mean, he's the luckiest motherfucker that I've seen, bro. Like, I've never seen a quarterback get this fucking lucky, dude. Like, and real quick, there was a point where they showed a graphic and talked about between, you know, Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tua Tagovailoa, and they showed how Ryan Fitzpatrick, the stats clearly show, and then of course when you watch the film it backs it up, that Ryan Fitzpatrick is actually more efficient for the Dolphins. But then they were like, until you know, then you look at the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick is 12-7, right? 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and Tua is, I think now he has 7 touchdowns because he had 1 in this game. But prior to that, he was 6-0, right? And look, I know that's the official stat, and that's the reality of how it turned out. But that's not the full picture, right? So this dude is getting super fucking lucky, and he threw a couple would-be picks again in this game and got super lucky. So, you know, and if he didn't, I mean, even if you take half of those, 4 interceptions, right? Like, I mean, the dude's gonna run out of luck eventually, right? Like, I mean, I hope not, right? But like, just me and the kind of person I am and the life that I've lived, I've learned that you cannot rely on being lucky. You just can't, because that's not how life works. So anyway, it is what it is. We'll see how that plays out. But the Bills did win, so we're still 1 game behind them. And this next game against the Chiefs is going to be super tough. And like I said, I ultimately think we're probably going to end up losing it. I don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to win the division. Again, I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but they have to at least match, if not do better than what the Bills do, right? So if the if the Bills win, then they have to at least win to keep pace. I mean, if the Bills were to win the rest of their games and the Dolphins were to win the rest of their games, they wouldn't win the division. They would be 1 game behind them, right? If the Dolphins were to tie their record, if the Bills and the Dolphins were both to have a tied record at the end of the season, overall record, I'm still pretty sure that the Bills are going to win, because I can virtually guarantee you that they're going to have the tiebreakers over the Dolphins. And so that would still likely give the Dolphins a playoff berth and a playoff spot, but it'll be in the wild card and not as the division leader. The only way the Dolphins are going to be able to win the division is if they have an outright, you know, winning record over the Bills, but that's going to be super hard to do. They have a long way to go, and they definitely, unfortunately, look, and so getting to this game now, this game, I'm going to do the injury report going into it, but this game overall was a fucking mess, an absolute fucking mess. But from multiple perspectives, not necessarily just the play on the field, but there were a ton of penalties on both sides of the ball, right? Both teams were committing a bunch of penalties, which made the game messy. There were 5 ejections in total, a couple different fights. Punches were thrown. 3 Dolphins players were ejected, all fairly because they all threw punches. You know, and so just... And then on top of that, there was also some sloppy play thrown in, particularly by the Dolphins offense. And of course, there was, you know, sloppy play by the other team as well. But obviously, you know, as a Dolphins fan and a Dolphins YouTuber, I generally go from the Dolphins perspective, but I do try and give the full picture. So they obviously did make, you know, mistakes. Their quarterback, I mean, they were without, you know, Joe Burrow. So Allen had to start for a couple games now, and you know, he made some mistakes and whatever, right? So there's that as well. But it was overall a messy game. And it did end up being low scoring, as I thought it would be. And the Dolphins did come away with their win, though, which is good. But as expected, right? Because this is a Bengals team who is going into the season, much like the Jets, right? And the Dolphins are a rebuilding team, and you know, have had their struggles and so on and so forth. And then that gets compounded by the fact that they've had their fair share of, you know, injuries, including significant ones, which includes their starting rookie quarterback in Joe Burrow, who suffered an ACL and MCL tear. He tore both in that knee. So he's going to be out for an extended period of time. And so, it's a bad team this season, who is in the process of rebuilding and has had significant injuries. So all expectations were that they were going to go in and they should get this win. They did. Although, again, I mean, when you take all of the factors into account, I just don't see how anybody looks at this team and says the Dolphins are dominant, because they're not. They're just not. They're not on that level of dominance. I mean, you can look at it from a number of different ways, but look, they scored only 19 points. Do you really think that's going to compete with the Chiefs? Like, are you kidding me? They scored 43 points one time, and that was against one of the hardest hit teams in the league to injuries, and that was the 49ers, right? So they were basically playing like, a practice squad team or a roster of backup guys because of the amount of injuries and COVID issues that they had. And so they were able to fucking, run rampant. But then the next week, sure, they beat the Jets 24-0, but they really should have just been gas pedal the entire game. It should have been 40-something-0, right? They should have been able to score over 30 points. And then this last time against the Jets, they did worse than the first time, right? So look, this Dolphins team is not dominant. Are they going to get there one day? I hope so. Maybe, possibly, but they're not there yet. And anybody that says that and thinks that based off of the stats, based off of the tape, based off of any of that, you're just not looking at the same thing. You're just not watching the same team, right? And anybody who wants to get mad at me and call me a fake Dolphins fan because I'm real about how this Dolphins team is performing, I mean, again, there's definitely good things. Their defense has absolutely carried them for the vast majority of the season and has shown some flashes of dominance. Now, I do believe that is somewhat offset by the fact that the teams that they have played have been majority bad teams and or had significant injuries, right? And so all of that goes into it. All right, now let's get a little bit more into it. Let's go into this injury report. So Miami Dolphins didn't answer many questions definitively with their final report before the game against the Bengals. That includes the status of the quarterback. One item that surfaced out of nowhere was Matt Breida, who was placed on the COVID-19 list. So they did go into this game with, I believe, only 2 running backs, which were Gaskin, who just got elevated off the injured reserve with a sprained MCL, and also Patrick Laird. Although I will say that Gaskin did look good, and he looked healthy and had some, a few nice runs, nothing super special. And the Dolphins, run game did well overall. And they need to perform at the level that they did in this game, every game, right? In the run game, right? They had a little over 100 yards, had some decent, I'd say nothing super long, no 30 plus yard runs. But they did have a few nice intermediate runs and stuff like that, and they did get over 100 yards on the ground, which their run game this season has been pretty bad overall. So they had a solid game in the run game this week, despite the fact that they had only 2 running backs. But again, it's a bad Bengals team that has a ton of injuries, etc. Anyway, his status is just of many involving the running back position, but the focus is on Tua with his thumb. Let's see. He didn't play against the Jets, blah, blah, blah. He had sustained an injury in practice. It was his thumb. Ryan Fitzpatrick started. Let's see. The Dolphins did list 2 players as doubtful for the game. That was Salvon Ahmed, with a shoulder injury, and DeAndre Washington with a hamstring injury. So another running back, both running backs. Let's see. Myles Gaskin did come off. I mentioned that. So let's see. I mean, they only listed those couple guys as out. Everyone else pretty much played. The Dolphins did have some injuries in this game. Let's see. The Bengals, though, they listed cornerback Tony Brown as out and guard Alex Redmond as out with, let's see, 7 players as questionable, including defensive tackle Christian Covington, guard BJ Feeney, let's see, linebacker Clark Harris, cornerback Darius Phillips, wide receiver Mike Thomas, defensive tackle Xavier Williams, and safety Brandon Wilson. So yeah, Anyway, beat up, bad team. Dolphins come into it at 7-4. They were 8-1 going into this game, right? And obviously the Dolphins were expected to get a win. They did get their win, right? So they are now 8-4 on the season, where the Bengals dropped to 2-9-1. It was ultimately a pretty low scoring game overall, as I thought it might be. And the Dolphins did win about the approximate margin that I thought they would, of 19-7. Was the final score. So the Dolphins now moved to 8-4 on the season. Bengals 2-9-1. The Dolphins had 406 total yards, which was good, right? That's a solid, a really solid number that you would like to see on a more regular basis from this offense, right? And to be fair, this offense and Tua statistically had a solid day overall, right? But they still have a long way to go. Still a lot of improvements need to be made, and they definitely need to be far more consistent. But that was 406 total yards, so solid there, to their 196. So even solid defensively in the yards department. Then we had 296 passing yards, solid, to their 156. Again, good. 110 rushing yards to their 40. Good. 6.1 yards per play to their 3.9. Good. We did have a fumble. Not good. They did not have a fumble. But we didn't throw any interceptions, and they threw 2. So we did win the turnover battle. So good. We were only 10% on third downs, though. Not good. That's pretty terrible. So that's... now, if you just look at these stats, that's really the only, bad one. We did have 8 penalties, which was a season high for us, so that's also not good. But we did win the time of possession battle, 32 minutes and 16 seconds to their 27-44. They had 6 penalties, and they were 25% on third down. So, and overall, when we get into more of the stats, the defense actually had a pretty damn good day overall. Just looking at the stat line, it was pretty dominant overall. Although when you do watch the tape, there was definitely some room for improvement, but they held it down, right? Minor criticisms overall, nothing really super, to harp on or whatever. So the Dolphins defense absolutely, carried them. They were the primary reason for this win, right? So, I would say as far as the factors that go into the result of this game, I would say it would probably started with the Dolphins defense was the biggest factor. Then you add in the messiness of the game. So all the penalties, the ejections and the fights, right? The mistakes made by both teams, right? Overthrows, miscommunications, drop balls, that kind of stuff. That was probably the second biggest factor in this game. I lump all of those different, little factors into one category of messiness, right? That's what I'm calling it. But that includes penalties, miscues, overthrows, all that kind of stuff, right? And then I would say Jason Sanders was the next biggest factor, and the Dolphins offense was the least effective factor in this equation, right? They honestly really didn't do much. And their attempts, or when they got down the field, they couldn't really score touchdowns. They had to settle for a bunch of field goals. We'll get into that a little bit more. But on the face, a lot of these stats do look good. And stat-wise, when it comes to the offense and the defense, this is where you want to see them on a regular basis, stat-wise. But again, that's not the full picture. And when you look at the tape, when you look at the mistakes that were made, that were thrown in there, they didn't cost the Dolphins the game or anything like that. When you count the ejections, when you count the penalties, right? All of these different things, they didn't cost the Dolphins the game, in part because they were playing a bad team that has a ton of injuries and who also were, very sloppy and made a bunch of mistakes. But yeah, I kind of forgot what I was going to say. They, on stat-wise, right, they definitely handled it, and that's where you want to see them. But they definitely have a lot of things to clean up. And when you add in these other factors of the messiness, the penalties, the miscues and stuff like that, the really lack of production on the offense and so on and so forth, the conclusion is that the Dolphins are really not that dominant of a team overall and definitely have a long way to go. And frankly, are not ready to compete in the playoffs and really not, frankly, ready to compete against teams like the Chiefs, who are about to play next week. Now, we'll see if they can prove me wrong, but that's, what the data suggests and shows, and that they are actually not as good as what their 8-4 record would suggest, or what even, these stats would suggest just on their face value. You really have to read into it and get the full picture and take all of the relevant factors into account. Some games, the penalties are just, they're not even really a factor at all. They're so minor that, they're not even really a big thing. In this game, penalties and stuff like that, the messiness was a big factor. Anyway, so continuing on, Tua was 26 of 39, 66.7% completion percentage, 296 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, and a 97.8 passer rating. So again, good stat line there, although again, he really should have had 3 interceptions, 2 for sure, but really 3 interceptions. But he did set career highs in yardage and I want to say like completions or whatever. Anyway, Brandon Allen was 11 for 19, 57.9% completion percentage, 153 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and a 79.5 passer rating. Ryan Finley was in there for a little bit as well, 6 of 7, 85.7% completion percentage, 40 yards, 1 interception, and a 50.9 passer rating. Myles Gaskin led the way for us in rushing, 21 rushes, 90 yards, and a 4.3 average. Lynn Bowden had 1 rush for 11 yards and an 1 rush for 11 yards. Giovanni Bernard led the way for them, 12 rushes, 30 yards, and a 2.5 average. Mike Gesicki led the way for us in the receiving game, 9 for 11 at 88 and a touchdown. Myles Gaskin, 2 of 2, 51 yards. Jakeem Grant, 2 of 6, 42. Lynn Bowden, 4 of 4, 41. Devontae Parker, 4 of 8 for 35 yards. Patrick Laird, 2 of 3 for 16. Durham Smythe, 2 of 2 for 16. Tyler Boyd led the way for them, 1 of 4 for 72 yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins, 5 of 7, 56 yards. Drew Sample, 7 of 7, 49 yards. Alex Erickson, 2 of 3 for 17 yards. Jakeem Grant did have a fumble in the game. It was on a punt return, but it did not end up as a turnover, as I think Noah Igbinoghene recovered it, if I remember correctly. Myles Gaskin did have a fumble that was recovered by the Bengals defense at one point. Defensively, Kyle Van Noy led the way for us with 8 solo tackles, 3 sacks, and 5 tackles for loss and a pass defense. So he had a really good game. Personally, the Dolphins defense, again, once I get to the overall stat line, had a really good day overall. But again, against a bad team who's rebuilding and dealing with a ton of injuries, including their starting rookie quarterback. Those things are relevant. So anybody who gets mad at me, saying the good things, but then also saying the bad things, well, I'm sorry, you can fuck off, because I'm going to give the full picture. So Xavier Howard had 4 solo tackles with 1 interception and a pass defense. He got his 8th of the season, which is, puts him firmly in the driver's seat for league lead. I hope he makes it to 10. That would be fucking awesome. I would love to see him get double digits in interceptions this season. And there's a few more games, man. I mean, I think we're going to lose 3 of them. We got, 4 more games, I think, right? We're 8-4. That's 12 total, 16 on the season. So, yeah, we have 4 more games. Quick maths. I think we're going to lose 3 of those to the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Bills. I think we'll beat the Patriots. But he definitely has an opportunity to get 2 more interceptions, and I would love to see that. Shaq Lawson was 3 solo, 1 assisted tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and a pass defense. Eric Rowe, 3 solo, 1 assisted tackles. Zach Sealer, 3 solo with 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. Bobby McCain, 3 solo tackles, 1 pass defense. Christian Wilkins, 2 solo, 1 tackle for loss. Raekwon Davis, 1 solo, 1 assisted, 1 tackle for loss. And Nick Needham with an assisted tackle, 1 interception, and 2 passes defensed. On the totals, they had 37 solo tackles and 9 assisted. So they had a solid amount of solo tackles, but obviously you want to see them have more assisted, which indicates that they are getting a bunch of defenders to the ball. They only had 9 assisted, where, you know, previous games I gave them, you know, credit for having a ton of assisted tackles. So they do generally get a bunch of guys to the ball. They didn't happen to in this game, but again, you know, other factors did play into that, penalties and so on and so forth, and it ultimately didn't matter because they won the game, and overall their stat line was pretty phenomenal, especially considering the fact that you then throw in 6 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 6 passes defensed. So it was a pretty phenomenal defensive day when you look at the stat line, and even the play on the field overall supports that. Again, those other factors are relevant, but they did have a really good day. Jesse Bates was 10 of 3, or 10 solo, 3 assisted for them with a forced fumble. Sam Hubbard, 7 solo, 3 assisted. LaShawn Sims, 4 solo, 4 assisted. Josh Bynes, 4 solo, 2 assisted. Von Bell, 3 solo, 3 assisted, and a fumble recovery. William Jackson, 3 solo tackles and 3 passes defensed. Logan Wilson, 2 solo, 1 assisted, and 1 pass defensed. So they had 41 total tackles, which was a little more than us, so they did a little bit better in that regard. And they had 25 assisted tackles. So that's more where the Dolphins usually are, and that's what you want to see out of a defense. That, you know, a defense that you expect to be a swarming defense and get a bunch of hats to the ball, right? They did also have the forced fumble and the fumble recovery and 4 passes defensed. In the kicking game, Jason Sanders was 4 of 4 on his field goals with a long of 48, 1 of 1 on his extra point. Randy Bullock missed his 1 field goal attempt and was 1 for 1 on his extra points. Matt Hawk had 4 punts for a 45 average, 2 inside the 20, a long of 55. Kevin Huber had 6 punts, a 49.5 average, 2 inside the 20 with a long of 3. No, I messed that up. I don't know what his long was. I apparently screwed that up, so I don't know. Anyway, kickoff returns, we didn't have any. Alex Erickson had 1 for 24 yards for them. In the punt game, Jakeem Grant had 4 returns for a 2 average and a long of 6. Alex Erickson had 2 returns for a 6.5 average and a long of 9. All right, now to the key points and the even deeper dive, right? Because now we looked at the stats. Now we're actually going to get into the breakdown of how the game actually played out. First of all, did we win? Yes. Obviously, we love to see it. Game breakdown. The first quarter, the Bengals did receive the ball to start the game. The Dolphins won the toss and elected to defer, which is great. First of all, I always love to have the ball in the second half. That's my preference, almost always. But I like the fact that when the Dolphins have won the tosses this year, they have elected to defer to the second half. So I do like that. So that's credit to them. Let's see. Bengals, on their first drive, the Bengals punted after 5 plays. Solid defensive effort by the Dolphins, capped by a slight miss throw by Allen on 3rd and 3 that likely would have been a long completion had he not thrown it out of bounds. The receiver came down with it, just couldn't stay in due to the ball placement. So, you know, that drive, the Dolphins did have a solid defensive effort through most of it, but that 3rd down play likely would have been a long completion, kept the drive going at the very least on that 3rd and 3, but it was slightly thrown out of bounds. The receiver did catch it, but couldn't get in because of that. Dolphins then go 3 and out on their first drive. It was 2 short runs capped off with an off-target intermediate throw by Tua to Gesicki on 3rd and 4. The Bengals were then intercepted on their second drive after 7 plays. Bengals were moving the ball well overall. Dolphins were showing solid defense, though, which ended up being most notable on the 1st and 10 play from the Dolphins 45, where they brought pressure that caused a short and errant throw from Allen, which led to a Xavier Howard interception. That was obviously his interception in the game. And, you know, X doing X things. The Dolphins defensive line got good pressure, which caused the errant throw and allowed X to do X things. Let's see. Dolphins then punted after 5 plays on their second drive. Couple notable things here. On a 2nd and 6, it was an incomplete pass to Parker due to miscommunication and an off-target throw by Tua. So miscommunication between the two. I think he threw long and Devontae Parker came back short. Something along those lines, if I remember correctly. And mistakes, right? And things that are going to happen because he's a rookie and because they need to get on the same page and build chemistry and stuff like that, right? So, and they obviously share responsibility there. Obviously, Parker has responsibility in making sure that he knows the play, but Tua's also got to share responsibility, right? Like, it would be ridiculous to say that he didn't make a mistake there. He did, but so did Parker. It caused an incomplete pass on 2nd and 6, brings up 3rd and 6. It was an incomplete pass to Grant that Tua threw into heavy traffic and ended as a deflected pass. To be fair, though, this is not one that I would say should have resulted in an interception, right? So I don't think that it was a good decision ultimately. I think because he did throw it into heavy traffic, and ultimately it did end up in, a deflected pass. And in other situations in the NFL, you're going to have those things pop up, but it will be an interception, right? So you do need to make better decisions in that regard. But I wouldn't say that it would have been, in this context, a likely interception because, he didn't throw it directly into the gut of the defender. The defender didn't really even get hands on it. He barely got to it. Like, he had to lay out to fucking get it and got the deflection. Good on him for really making the special effort kind of play or whatever, but it was never a situation where it was going to be a likely interception, right? Let's see. Then the Bengals get a touchdown after three plays on their third drive, bringing it to 7-0. And the notable here is that on a 3rd and 2 play, it was a short pass into the flat to Tyler Boyd, and the defense just had a breakdown where a defender took a bad angle, which caused a missed tackle and allowed the receiver to streak down the sideline and avoid other defenders for the 72-yard score. And so, obviously defensive breakdown there, but that was pretty much the only time the defense really had a major gaffe. And in fact, they actually were really good overall against the run today, which they have had their struggles with. Let's see. The Dolphins then get the ball and they get a field goal after 10 plays on their third drive to make it 7-3. Some notes here. 1st and 10, there was an incompletion to passer. An incompletion to Parker, but there was a defensive pass interference that gave them a spot foul and an automatic first down. I just note that because what I'm trying to do is I'm doing my best to just give you guys the facts of how things played out, right? I know people don't like when I point out the bad stuff, but it's just how the result got there, right? Like, that's the equation. It's these different factors that ended in this result. And you're not going to get the result that we got if you don't include the important and relevant factors that go into that equation. So, but I'm doing my best to just, give you the important things that stick out that were ultimately the cause of whatever happened on that play or that drive or for the game, right? Anyway, so then that's how the drive started. It was 1st and 10, incomplete pass. The Bengals got a defensive pass interference. The Dolphins gained some yardage and a first down. Then a little bit later, there was a 2nd and 8 play. It was a pass to Parker, and this should have been an interception. So it was an interception. He threw the interception. The Bengals defender caught the ball. He had a run back, blah, blah, blah. But they were called for defensive pass interference. The defender who caught the ball, the defender on Parker was called for a pass interference. Now, Parker did go to the ground on that play, but when you look at the fucking replay, it was a total bad call because at the end of the day, the defender did what he was supposed to do. He jammed Parker at the line of scrimmage. He didn't hold on to him. He didn't wrap him up. He didn't pull him or tug him or anything like that, right? Nothing that would be illegal anyway within that 5 yards. But Parker tripped. He stumbled, he tripped, and he went down. And they called it. I mean, it is what it is, bro. Like, again, people will get upset at me because I point these things out and because, I don't just automatically rule in the Dolphins' favor and shit like this, but I got to keep it real, bro. Like, it was a bad call. I mean, I'll take it. Don't get me wrong. I'll take it. It gave the Dolphins another pass interference and it took the interception off the board. But, dude, that motherfucker, Tua, is lucky as fuck because it should have been an interception. It just should have. And again, people can get mad at me for this, but it just should have. So, just real quick, defender jammed Parker at the line. Parker went to the ground because he stumbled and tripped, not because he was held or whatever. There was also an illegal blindside block after the interception that was declined in favor of the defensive pass interference because the other penalty would not have taken the interception off the board and kept the ball with the Bengals. So that is important to note. Additionally, it did give the Dolphins a spot foul, which added 15 yards and an automatic first down. So these are relevant factors that went into the outcome of this drive. So again, people can be mad at me for talking about it, but it is what it is. Dolphins moved the ball okay after that, but after the bad officiating for a few plays, but were then helped out again on a 2nd and 2 from the Bengals 12-yard line by an offsides penalty that gave them a first down after a no-gain run by Gaskin. So the Dolphins were pretty substantially helped out on this drive by penalties, most notably because it took away an interception that Tua should have thrown. And so, going into the day, he should have had 5 interceptions that were not interceptions for a number of different reasons, right? Because of penalties or because the defender just so happened to not be able to hold on to the ball, etc., etc. This dude is like obscenely lucky. And look, again, don't get me wrong. On one hand, I love it. But the reason why I push back against it is only because of the fact that it can't last. Like, that's just not reality, man. Like, I know people like to live in their little fantasy worlds and think that everything's fucking, rainbows and unicorns and shit. But it's not. And that's not how the world works. So eventually this dude's going to fucking run out of luck and he's going to throw interceptions. And look, I mean, there's a substantial possibility that, it comes big. So maybe, who knows? This Chiefs team is great. Maybe they start playing from behind because their offense is so fucking powerful, the Chiefs offense, and then maybe he throws 2 or 3 interceptions in this game against the Chiefs, right? So I don't know. Hopefully not, obviously, and I would love to see them stun the Chiefs and get a win. But it's going to catch up to him eventually, right? And then everybody's going to fucking poo-poo and shit because he fucking... And then they'll probably be like, Tua sucks. There'll probably be a bunch of people that are like, Tua sucks, or like blah, 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 And then, of course, there'll be the people that don't want to just fucking acknowledge the reality. Whatever. Anyway. Moving on. Second quarter, Bengals go 3 and out on their 4th drive. Good defensive effort by the Dolphins there. Then the Dolphins get the ball back and have to punt after 6 plays on their 4th drive. The Dolphins start backed up after a holding call on Dolphins on the punt. On 1st and 10, Tua barely overthrew Grant on a deep shot, but to be fair, it was just off the fingertips. Grant still likely could have caught the ball, but both players were definitely share the fault for this incompletion. Grant, it touched his hands. It got to his hands. He probably could have, made it. Even when he got up off the ground, he kind of like, kind of thing, screamed into the abyss and was like, I could have fucking had that. So that's absolutely true. But he didn't have it in part because Tua was just a little bit off target. Now, again, I mean, people will look at that in this particular context on this one play, right? Some of these plays, especially some of the ones that should have been interceptions, I thought were terrible decisions and were examples of like really bad plays by Tua that fortunately for him didn't turn out bad, right? But in this case, it's really just a minor criticism. So in this one instance, in this very specific particular instance on this one play, it was just barely off. And so that is something that I would expect would get better over time as they, build more chemistry, have more time together, more practice time, get more throws in, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, and they both equally share blame for that incompletion. It's not all on Tua. Dolphins had a couple nice plays for good gains, and then Tua threw a bad off-target throw that was a near interception that should have been picked after escaping pressure in the pocket. He threw it right to the defender who couldn't hold on, and I added in that he's the luckiest son of a bitch ever. So this was the second one in the game that he should have thrown an interception on and didn't. I swear, bro, this dude is super lucky. Anyway, shortly after, Tua gets drilled on the release of his throw. It was like the very next play or maybe a couple plays later. He got drilled, which you never want to see. Period. You hate when your quarterback gets hit like that. It was a clean hit, but it was a tough hit. It was a hard hit. So you like to see your quarterback take hits like that, especially when it's an undersized quarterback who has a significant injury history and, in fact, has already had 2 injuries this year in the very short time that he's played. Both a foot and a finger injury on his throwing hand. Anyway, so he got drilled on the release. Also, this throw actually also could have been picked off, but the defender was a little late in reacting to the short, wobbly throw. This one, of course, was not due to his mistake, but rather forced by the hit. So I want to make it clear. This should have been... I think the term is likely interception. And in fact, real quick side note, I tried to look it up. There was, was it Pro Football Reference? I can't remember off the top of my head now who it was, but there was one website that I saw that actually goes back and does the calculations of should be or likely, I think is the term, likely interceptions that should have happened but got called back by penalties or by were thrown right into the defender's hands. They just couldn't squeeze it, those kinds of things, right? But I didn't see any stats for this season. So my guess is that they do it after the fact, which I guess makes sense, especially because they're probably really busy throughout the actual season. And that's probably a ton of work to have to go through and do. But I would be curious to see, man, because from my count, this dude should have thrown 8 fucking interceptions to this point. He's just gotten stupid lucky. Anyway, but to be clear, though, this one has nothing to do with him, right? It's just, unfortunate. If it would have been an interception, it would have been unfortunate because the defense called a good play. They got pressure. They affected the throw by getting to the quarterback, and it, had it been an interception, it would have resulted in an interception, right? So, but that would have been through no fault of Tua's. It just is what it is, and that shit happens, right? But that's also part of the reason why I say his luck is going to run out, because those things do happen. This dude is just getting lucky beyond all fucking measure. Anyway, the ruling on the field, though, was a fumble recovered by the Bengals that was returned for a touchdown. The ruling was ultimately overturned. To be fair, it was super close as the elbow of his throwing arm barely started to shift forward while the ball and his hand were still actually behind his head. So, I guess to give you a visual, I'm a right-handed guy, but I will try and do this with my left hand. So he wound back, right? And here's the back motion. Then his elbow started to come forward, but his hand did not yet start to come forward. When you look at the slow motion replay, that's when he got hit. That's when the ball comes loose. So the point here is that it's a couple points. One, it is super, super close and hard to make, an accurate call because it's so fucking close. But the ruling, was ultimately overturned. However, they did call on the field. The ruling on the field was a fumble recovered for a touchdown. And because it was so close, and because of the ruling on the field, I think that they should have let it stand as it was. I think that would have actually been the appropriate calling. You could then argue the initial call to begin with. But again, it was super close. So I can't fault the officials for calling it a fumble, which was clearly scooped up and returned by the defense. And since it was so close, I really think that by the rules, it should have stayed. Anyway, there's actually going to be another example on the flip side that we'll talk about. In other words, there's another similar example that happened later in the game, but it was to the Bengals quarterback. The Dolphins got in there, and so we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see. But yeah, based on the ruling of the field, it should have stood, so on and so forth. Anyway, it did not. The Dolphins did end up having to punt on that drive, so they didn't even get any points, which obviously is not good. but it didn't end up in a fumble recovery for a touchdown. But again, though, I mean, Tua got fucking lucky there because, you know, he got drilled. They ruled it on the field as a fumble recovery for a touchdown, and he just got lucky that they overturned it when they really shouldn't have. If for no other reason, then that's what they called on the field, and it was just that way too close. It wasn't definitive, right? Anyway, Bengals miss a field goal, though, on their next drive after 11 plays. The Dolphins were called for unnecessary roughness after Allen went to slide. This was early in the drive. And again, I say it because it's relevant to how the drive went, right? So the Dolphins were called for unnecessary roughness. It was a good call. Two defenders came down hard on him, including to the head and neck area after he gave himself up. To be fair, it is super difficult for defenders to let up in a bang-bang play like that. But this is the one instance, or this is an example of when I personally would call it, because the quarterback did clearly give himself up on the slide. So, you know, you can try and pull up, but that's hard to do. I understand that. But then when you add in the fact, when you take that, right, that one data point of the quarterback clearly gave himself up, and then they also made, incidental or not, contact with his head and neck injury. When you add those things together, to me that adds up. Call the penalty, right? For example, though, if that same thing would have happened but they didn't land on the dude's head, I'd be like, nah, don't fucking call the penalty, just let it be football, bro, because that's fucking football. Like, I despise the landing on the quarterback with all your weight rule. I think it's the absolute dumbest rule to have in the game. And it makes no fucking sense whatsoever. It's fucking football. It's a physical, violent sport, and especially for defenders. Like, you know, and a couple years ago, God damn it, I can't even remember his name now, but one of our defensive linemen tore his ACL trying to contort his body so he didn't land on the fucking quarterback. Like, it's just stupid. Anyway, and it's like impossible to do, damn near. Like, it's absurd. Anyway, continuing on, Dolphins then had another penalty that they gave the Bengals 5 yards and an auto first down on a holding call. They followed that up with another penalty, an offsides penalty, giving the Bengals another 5 yards and a short first down. So, you know, look, the Bengals had some penalties early on that helped the Dolphins. These ones were penalties on the Dolphins that helped the Bengals. So ultimately, I would say penalties did kind of, when it comes to just the singular factor of penalties, the Dolphins had more, but I would say it was pretty even overall, and I would say that there was bad calls across the board. The officiating crew, I mean, they weren't terrible. They weren't the worst officiating crew I've seen, but they did have some bad calls that affected both teams. But when you add that into the ejections and the fights and the miscommunications and all that, under the sloppiness, then all of those things, all of those individual factors lump into the one factor that I call messiness or sloppiness of the game, that ultimately I think was the second highest factor of the game, right? So those individual factors, like to try and be clear here, those individual factors, when taken into consideration individually, were, you know, overall smaller portions of the overall result. But then when you just, you know, I guess for, I don't know, efficiency or whatever, I lumped them in together. Anyway, I actually really got to bounce here. So I'm going to just breeze through the rest of it. Look, so at the end of the day, I actually really got to go. But we had some injuries too. Grant, Eric Flowers, Eric Rowe, Landon Roberts. Eric Flowers and Landon Roberts were out of the game. Taken out of the game, and we're going to have to keep an eye on them to see if they're going to be able to play this next week, which is concerning. Eric Rowe and Grant did come back in, so that's good. Hopefully they're going to be okay. But yeah, so look, man, the Dolphins, ultimately, they got their win. It was sloppy overall for a number of different reasons. The Dolphins defense carried the day. The Dolphins offense has a long way to go, and they got a really tough opponent against the Chiefs, who unfortunately, and if I'm just keeping it real, I don't think that they're going to win against. So, yeah. All right, guys. With that, I am going to bounce up out of here. because I do have something that I really need to get to. So sorry to cut it a little bit short. I did want to give you some more in-depth examples, but I think you guys get the point, and I don't want to drone on too far anyway, so I am going to end it there. I hope you guys do appreciate and enjoy my perspectives. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts, share my channel and videos with your friends and family, leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section, and of course, as always, follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I'm out. We'll see y'all soon. Phins up.